Well, how are we?
Matt, what is the crack?
Not too much. How about yourself?
Sure, living out my dreams here in Costa del Norwood.
Costa del Norwood. Well, that's good to hear. You're only down the road from me, but I suppose we're outside each other's containment zone. So
Yeah, worlds apart.
exactly. We see a few people are dropping in already. Eric, true to his word, this afternoon was asking if he could catch us live this evening, and he's tuning in from Belgium.
That's him. That's his profile picture there outside Teeling, I think, is it?
Inside Teeling with Dr. John Teeling.
To address him by his proper title.
Listen, he was UC Smurfit's Alumnus of the Year in '94. I'll have you know, which was on the wall and brought up to me a couple of times when I was in Smurfit.
Fair.
Like whiskey, that lad does whiskey. Oh yeah. Matt Kelly giving us a little shout out from the States, from Charleston.
No, we didn't even dress up for it, Matt. Don't worry about it.
And Michael is wearing a flowery shirt this time, though, so that's quite good. We got Carl. He's glad to catch us from live. Don't watch it back this time, Carl. That's good to hear. Darren in Waterford. Making the whiskey world's answer to the odd couple. I don't know if this maybe the Irish whiskey world's answer to the odd couple.
Yeah, I'll take that, Matt. I'll take that. Yeah. Hi, Mick. My sister says hi. Yeah, listen, Segan. Send me pictures. I don't know. Yeah.
And moving swiftly onwards from that, Dave Cummins. He must be hard at work with the bovine these days. It must be just morning.
He's unsure what time it actually is. Okay, fair enough.
He in fairness, he breeds prize livestock. So in fairness, it could be some farming related equinox.
And also some great cows.
What did I say? No. So a few lads saying hello from Manchester. We've got some people down in Kerry saying hello. Jamie from the Northern Parish. What's going on, Jamie? And Serge from the Irish Whiskey Magazine dropping in and say best of luck with the new webcast. So
cheers, Serge.
Appreciate it.
Because I caught a bit of Serge's yesterday. He was talking to Finn and the guys from Dick Max, Finn and Peter and Bernard, then from the Irishman and stuff as well. So they were chatting all things seaweed cask.
They were. That was quite an interesting talk and a good bit of slagging going on as well with the kind of four-way video chat that has gone on. A lot of comparisons being made to a lot of the kind of West Coast and coastal scotches as well, which I found interesting. So kind of intrigued by that seaweed cask.
Well, I mean, I think the lads in Dick Max are putting it up. You can buy a measure of it from next week, maybe. So it might be a good opportunity because it is sold out. So, I mean, it is the only opportunity you're going to have to taste it anyway.
It's kind of like a dram share kind of idea.
I think so, yeah. I think Finn is planning just, so because he has so many bottles in the bar, I think he's just planning to put them into bottles, sell it, and selling them out via the internet. So might be a good chance. And they have some cool stuff in there anyway. So might be a good chance to get on.
Exactly. All right. Well, that kind of works out. Jeff dropping in again from Austin, Minnesota. I'm sure in the middle, I think 2 p.m. right now in Central Time. So appreciate
Jeff,
that.
What are you drinking, Jeff? What are you drinking?
Jeff, you definitely have to let us know what's pretending to be in that coffee cup. Then we've got Jeff Adams, another Jeff, coming from the US as well. Then I swear, you know what, Jamie? You surprised me every time.
One for our UK viewers.
Exactly. Then hello on behalf of Belfast Whiskey Club. So it's great to see some of our friends from the Belfast Whiskey Club. And we did actually mention them last week on the show.
I think we were told to mention them, to be fair.
So I suppose welcome to another episode of Potstilled Live. It has been an interesting week in Irish whiskey. Obviously, lots of stuff has been going on. I suppose this episode is brought to you by the Connacht Whiskey Company, the Cowman guys down there. Yeah, exactly. To your right. There you go. Yeah, it's confusing.
Everything is mirrored, so it's hard. All right.
Yeah. So in particular, when you see my little shelves behind me of the Ballyhoo. Actually, I have 2 bottles of Ballyhoo here because it's a particular favorite single grain of mine, and it's actually just been recently kind of redesigned and reformulated, so that's quite cool. And then we also have the Spade and Bushel casks as well. This particular episode being brought to you by Spade and Bushel 5-year-old Amarone cask. You got yours there, Michael?
I have indeed. Yeah, my here we go. Oh, that way.
I had a larger chunk taken out of last week's bottle, and you have a larger chunk taken out of this week's bottle. That way.
I mean, yeah, just getting to grips with it. Amarone, like I was doing a little bit of research and reading because while spirits are my thing, maybe wine isn't so much. I have worked with champagne and stuff before, but not so much wine. So when it comes to wine cask finishes, it is always something I have to educate myself on a little bit. So it's just a really interesting wine type, really interesting grape varietal that we can get into.
Yeah, I suppose we could probably kick off with just talking about this one a little bit, because as a part of Irish Whiskey News Roundup, this is quite relevant. It's literally just launched I think like yesterday or the day before, going on sale in the likes of the good whiskey retailers around Ireland. But this in particular, 5-year-old single malt, as you can see on the bottom of the screen there, it has, they say, a minimum of 3 years in ex-bourbon, and then it has a minimum of 13-month finish in Amarone wine casks. And I was actually speaking to David Stapleton of Connacht earlier on the phone, and he was kind of giving me a little insight into what they're doing with the kind of Spade and Bushel range, and they're very much trying to make a whiskey with a wine finish rather than a wine with a whiskey finish, if that makes sense. So to still have the kind of backbone of the
whiskey characteristics coming through. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And I think it's quite interesting that they're, that's kind of one of their main focuses. And they're saying that, in particular with this, and then, even more so with the Ballyhoo behind me, that they're paying very close attention to their finishes. They're kind of watching them almost on a weekly basis at this point. And particularly, as I said, with the single grain as well, they can be quite temperamental and kind of flip to that kind of overpowering nature as it is quite quickly. But I like
it. I like it. I mean, Amarone, it only makes sense because, look, when you read up about it, Amarone is a very big red. It's up there with the likes of a Barolo and stuff. When you're talking about red wines, and it's a super expensive wine. I don't think I realized I've had Amarone maybe once, twice in my life. Hey, hi David, and I don't think I realized quite how expensive it is and why it's so expensive. Because it comes from one region in Italy, so it's up around that kind of Verona, around the city of Verona, and the grapes are basically dried out to where they are only about 40-50% of their original volume. So you're talking like 4 months of drying out, and essentially what you're talking about is double the amount of grapes going into a bottle of Amarone as opposed to a normal wine because of that drying out process. So you get really concentrated sugars. You get this big 14.5-15% ABV wine. So you can see why it'd work quite well, especially with younger whiskies for a finish. I like this. A lot of tannin, kind of quite big, takes on a lot of flavor of the wine without being overpowering. And I think you still definitely get the whiskey coming through.
Yeah, absolutely. Still, and even behind the wine finish, you're still getting a lot of that kind of oak vanilla, the kind of vanillins of the bourbon cask, which is quite cool. So I can see what if they were going for that balance. There's a lot going on in this glass, but it's definitely not overpowered in one direction or the other, which I think is quite cool. We have a little question coming here from South Africa. Do you want to? They're your lads down there. If you want to take this one.
Sagan, it's a single malt, so it's a 5-year-old single malt. So when you talk about that dryness, I think sometimes it's that tannin kind of note, and there's certainly a good bit of tannin on this, but I think there's good mouthfeel as well, and you're kind of getting it rounds out, and there is a good finish to it. So I don't think it dries out at 45%. You're not getting too much of that alcohol, and it's reasonably it's quite well balanced as well. So I don't think it's too dry. There is quite a lot of flavor there.
Alan dropping in with a nice Shakespeare quote there in our favorite we lay our casks. What'd you say?
Let's see, we have very educated listeners.
Exactly. I actually had a funny thing. I was myself traveling around Italy at the start of the year pre-COVID, and we ended up in Verona with a team of salespeople, and kind of we were kind of just jazzing about different things. And there was some joke made about kind of Rome and Caesar, whatever. And I said, "Oh, et tu brute, like et tu brute," and they were like, "What?" I was like, "Et tu what?" Like just throwaway comment, and they were like, like what? I don't get it. And then one of the guys took me aside, and he's like, "That's Shakespeare. That's English. It's not Italian. We don't study him." And I was like, "Gotcha, gotcha. That's fiction."
There goes like 50% of my references. Boom, gone.
Yeah, I was like, and then I was wandering through Verona with the guys, and there was a bust of Shakespeare on one of the city walls, and I was like,
I mean, look, James Joyce is from Dublin. Doesn't mean I've read Ulysses.
no,
So.
Noel O'Connor could definitely probably recite it backwards and forwards to you, though. Matt in Charleston saying he's drinking some Charleston County tap water. I don't know if it's a euphemism for bourbon or not, but we'll have to believe him. Jeff, he's not working today, which is great. Having a sip of Calvados cask Irish whiskey, which is quite cool. Ivor dropping. What did you say?
I assume that's maybe the Teeling Calvados cask.
Possibly.
Let us know, Jeff.
Matt Kelly says he's working on a work called "Don't Discuss a Single Grain Without Him." Conor O'Hare up in the Mourne Mountains, dropping in with a Clonakilty single grain whiskey sour. So he's clearly enjoying his WSET courses, teaching him a little bit about flavors and mixology right there. So welcome everyone, I suppose, at that point that has been just tuning in as well. As always, we'll take all of your questions about anything related to talking about in this part of the show. I know we have a few different things, Michael, to talk about. I don't know if you want to start us off with any of them in particular.
Yeah, well, before we hop in, maybe it's worth asking ourselves: is this the best thing to come out of Mayo since Normal People? I mean, that's really the question you have to ask yourself, isn't it?
Or is Normal People the best thing to come out of Mayo since this?
That's very true. That's very true. I mean, which came first? Connacht Distillery wasn't somewhere I knew a huge amount about it, and I think because they're only starting to release some more age statements. Obviously, their own whiskey is aging now as well. It's somewhere that's it's going to be super interesting to watch in future. Obviously, there's quite a few distilleries now over in the west of Ireland, and with Connacht being in the middle of Ballina, it is quite an interesting one to kind of have a look at.
Yeah, they're quite. It's quite a cool place. I dropped down a couple of years ago. I was up the road in Enniskillen getting some seaweed bats and hanging out. Yeah.
So sorry, I just see Dara coming in. Normal People with Sligo. It was, but Sally Rooney's from Castlebar. All right, that's so she's from Mayo. Let's carry on. Let's carry on. All right.
I'm just going to point out that I have not watched the show. But yeah, so
you'd be ringing into Lifeline, Matt, if you watched the show.
I have been hearing about. I've been hearing about all of this kind of going on in the world of Irish sensationalism of mammies ringing into Joe Duffy, but I don't know if I've quite. I don't know. Is it good enough? Should I watch it, Michael? You tell me.
It's a great show. I've watched it all, read the book. I think it's well worth a watch. There's a 24-minute supercut, I think, online of all the sex scenes as well. So if that's your thing, get stuck in, Matt.
Well, all right. We do have some people dropping in with having the 5-year-old Amarone as absolutely very robust flavor. It definitely doesn't leave your palate wanting.
Most definitely.
But I know you have. I think we had some tweets in from last week's inaugural show they wanted to share with us.
I mean, look, last week I thought went well, but it wasn't all positive feedback. I did get a few messages, but the majority of them were very positive. I got 3 in particular that I want to read out for you. So this one came in from Omar F. Sorry, that's too obvious. We'll call it O Fitzel. So you two are the worst thing to happen to Irish whiskey since the column still. So that was one. Number 2, then this came in anonymously from the Wee Nordy. And Matt Healy is the Shane Ross of Irish whiskey. He's always there, and you're not sure why.
Well, that's topical. It's definitely topical. Yeah.
And then the third one from the Wee Ginger, and it's the only thing that's moving faster than Cowman's hairline are bottles of Redbreast Dream Cask. So at least they are keeping their slags topical and related to whiskey.
Exactly, and you know what? At least some of them could be partially true. I don't know how far Redbreast Dream Cask is moving so far. I think 7,000 submissions onto the ballot system or something like that is expected.
Okay. Yeah, sounds probably about right. Like I would say everyone and their mother has about three different emails that they're signed up for. Various people's dogs, I'm sure, have email addresses at this point to enter the ballot system. Exactly.
And if anyone feels like owning up to any of those anonymous tweets in the comments, please do feel free to chime in. So I suppose we should, hit on our first topic of the evening, which is our non-whiskey related topic for I suppose the only non-whiskey related topic of the show being the new Flying Flamingo Irish Hard Seltzer. Now, this is something that I suppose the two of us kind of wanted to talk about a little bit.
Yeah, like I think you lived in the States, okay, and I've been seeing memes for about the last year of hard seltzer, particularly White Claw, which again, this is why we're having this conversation, because White Claw launched this week, and so did Flying Flamingo, which is the Irish alternative. But you're looking at hard seltzers are looking at about 2.5 billion in sales in 2021. That's what they're aiming at. So they are going to be huge, but are they going to be huge in the Irish market? Because they're essentially flavored alcohols, sparkling water is basically what you have, and they're not very sweet. And if I know anything about the Irish palate, is we do tend to have a very sweet palate. So what I've done to prepare is I've gone to Tesco and I bought a bottle of a can of Flying Flamingo. So cheers, I'm gonna crack this open.
So there's two flavors coming from the guys at Alltech Beverage, who are the guys behind Pierce Lyons Brewery in Dundalk and Pierce Lyons Distillery in Dublin. How is it there, Michael? Which flavor did you go for?
I went for the pineapple punch. That's not bad. I can see, like I was chatting to friends of mine who have lived in the States, and they said people buy like 12, 24 packs, that kind of thing. And I can absolutely see why. It's 5%. It's very, very like drinkable, very easy to drink. I did hear stories of people who said, their parents were like drinking a can of White Claw because they thought it was, great and getting them up for the morning. And then they realized there was alcohol in it. They said they were going around in a great mood all day, because genuinely, when you taste this, you genuinely wouldn't know there's alcohol in this. 5% ABV. I quite like that. I'm not going to lie to you.
That's good to hear. I said there's two flavors. They have the kind of pineapple, and then there's, I think, a peach punch as well. So Assume wants to say he doesn't trust your palate because we see here's coming in as well. Jeff wants to get us some Ugg boots to go with that. So some there's some shots coming across the bow here. I think it's quite cool. I mean, it is, as I suppose the Irish White Claw, I suppose, in a way. The market's pretty much about to be flooded with hard seltzers in Ireland. What's interesting about these is there's previously been canned cocktails, which has been spirit based. And they took off to a degree, but tax is really high on spirits in Ireland, so they kind of did a bit, and then they never really went anywhere after that. And as you said, a lot of them tended to be kind of very heavily reliant on the sugar.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about this. It's it's less than 100 calories, 90 calories in a can, so it appeals to a certain segment of the market.
90 calories.
There you go. Sorry, dude. It appeals to a certain segment of the market. So, there's three. There's there's White Claw, and there's one from Ska Brewing, which I think has been out a while. On a scale of canned meatballs to where's that tweet there? Can pull up that tweet, man. I don't know how to pull up the tweets. On a scale of canned meatballs to spam. No, dude, I would like drink this normally. I think this and some spam fried rice. I'm good to go for the evening. Genuinely, I'm pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, they're kind of made in a cool way because they're not spirit based. They're what's called a malt beverage base, which is kind of a very strange thing because it's gluten free, vegan, and they make like a. It's really weird. They make a fermented base to like 18 or 20% alcohol. Not quite sure how that works. But they then put it through like every filter imaginable until it is just neutral, clear, colorless alcohol and water. That's it. And
Yeah,
that's
and basically very little sugar. Anyway, look, I'm gonna get ripped. I'm gonna get absolutely ripped for liking this. I can tell. Like, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, Alan's come in to say is hard sell to the pumpkin spice latte of the alcohol world. Possibly, Alan. Possibly. I mean, vodka sodas and vodka tonics were large for a number of years, so we'll see. We'll see if this just takes the canned form of that.
Surely the pumpkin spice latte was a massive glass of gin and tonic with your most expensive tonic and a gin you can't pronounce. Surely that was the pumpkin spice latte.
Possibly. I do want to throw one up just in relation to the mean tweets. Louise thinks I died inside in particular. That's I'll definitely have to grow a second skin for next week's show.
2 comfort pills, man. Toughen the. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, that's what people used to say to me of playing like rugby in school and stuff. Learn tall, I'll learn to toughen up. So I suppose the first main whiskey thing of our Potstilled live segment this week, the Dreamcast ballot has gone live. Obviously, because it was open or it still is open from 25th of May to the 2nd of June. There wasn't that kind of crash and fervor of excitement that you usually saw with 17,000 people trying to log on to one website at one time. And as you said, last week, they're very much kind of focused on the kind of fair aspect of trying to get it out to everyone, in a reasonable manner and quite kind of like across the board. I had Dave McCabe, the blender from Middleton, on Saturday for a special edition of Potstilled Live, and you can check that out on the Potstilled YouTube page. And he was just because you weren't in the episode, Michael. Come on, you were busy. But yeah, he kind of echoed your sentiment on fair. I think it was quite a clever way to do it. And
look, I think if you look at what the global standard is now in a lot of cases when it comes to, I suppose, Scotch, which has been doing a lot of these over the years, maybe they've learned that that's probably the best way to do it. But it is there has to be there's always a balancing act here, because it's, should the guys who are in very first, ready with their finger, ready to pounce, should they be the first ones, or is it fair if we just throw it out to everybody? Is the guy who finds out about it with an hour to go on the ballot system kind of thing on the 7th day, they're just as deserving, I guess, and I think that it probably is the fairest way to do it. And they're going to have thousands of entries, and the way the system is lined up, look, there's only 800 odd bottles, so people are going to be disappointed, but I think they've done their best with the system.
Yeah. Matt Kelly dropping in to say he thinks someone will always be upset no matter which way you do it, and Sagan wants to drop out and say the ballot system he thinks works best.
Whether it's the price or the limited edition or the limited quantity of bottles or whatever it is, someone will always have something to complain about. But yeah, for me, I think the ballot system is probably the best way forward, and should hopefully sort out a few problems from last year.
Here's an interesting. I mean, this is kind of an opinion question. Are people less excited about the Dreamcast? Everyone just imagines they'll never get to try it. I don't know. There was to me from kind of the online, the people seemed quite excited about it this year. I mean, I don't think any year is going to go by without the excitement of a Redbreast Dreamcast. I just think we're seeing less about it right now because of that. Yeah.
It's spread out. It's spread out over a longer period. And so you're not going to see as much interest. But I think most people will get to, if you really want to try these whiskies, there's so many opportunities now to try these things. A lot of the bars around Dublin will have these, look, I'm obviously talking from an Irish perspective. If you're in the States, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But a lot of the bars in around the cities, A lot of the main whiskey bars will have it. There will be, bottle shares going around the place. People will be looking to split up bottles and stuff, which will make it reasonably affordable for people to, a lot more affordable for people to kind of be able to have a taste. Certainly, I've been in loads of bars around Ireland. I'm again specifically talking about Ireland that have had the last 2 dream casks on their menu. At reasonable-ish if you really, really want to try it. From reasonable-ish to very expensive, but if you really want to try it, you definitely can, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you'll definitely find bottle shares and whatnot as well going on as well.
Which is the real value way to try it,
Yeah, exactly. And 890 bottles are going out to the public. So I think there'll be happy people and upset people, but hopefully it'll be kind of an even spread on the kind of fairness scale. We hopefully won't see people ending up with 20 bottles stored in an auction in one go.
I think someone might be lynched this year if someone puts up a picture of 20 bottles or something. But look, if there's a system, someone's always going to find a way to game the system. But hopefully this is the fairest way to do things.
Yeah. Roland says, he drops in saying Irish whiskey seems to be exploding with innovation at the moment.
So VP is another one of the guys, a friend of mine from South Africa, big whiskey head, and very much a Scotch man. But yeah, I like it when you can see guys who are, I would say, and Vernon, I'm sure will agree with me, he was Scotch heavy. Now he loves his yellow spot, but he's Scotch heavy, and you can see the innovation coming in Irish whiskey, and it is really a differentiating factor for us that globally we can kind of do a little bit of different stuff, which is going to differentiate us from the rest of the pack.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're going to see a lot more as the distilleries start coming online with their own juice. I think we're going to see a lot more innovation coming from them, even in terms of the likes of blended malts and different kind of grains. And, even Pierce Lyons, who we had on the show last week, they're already blending their whiskeys with their malt with a different distillery's malt and then a third distillery's grain, just to kind of differentiate themselves, which I think is quite cool. Just a shout out to you for South Africa. So that's quite cool.
It's good times.
And Peters wants to drop and say the Sky and the Ground in Wexford host Dreamcast tastings every year. Yes, I know Will Murphy down there. He works tirelessly to get his hands on. He's probably one of the most knowledgeable people on Redbreast in the country. He definitely tries to get his hands on as the Dreamcast bottles for that kind of consumer experience to get you in there.
And just final point on that. Like, I just want to say that the Sky and the Ground is the winner of the Paddy Losty Cup for 2020 as well. So we will have a night down there as well for the celebration of the Paddy Losty Cup. Fantastic bar if anyone hasn't been to it.
They will have your tinfoil trophy.
They will
somewhere in the bar for the Paddy Losty Cup. So I suppose we can move on a little bit. The 3 drams by irishmalts.com is something that I think is getting a lot of attention, especially today.
A lot of traction.
Yes, and they have. Basically, what it is it's a subscription dram service that'll come three drinks to your door every month, launching in November. And as I said, it's a subscription service. You sign up, and they send you kind of the latest and greatest innovation and whatnot from Irish whiskey. That they are kind of the people for the innovation releases and the small batch releases at the moment. And I think that's kind of where they're going to kind of niche the market a little bit on that. But today, a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week ago, they did their kind of first trial run with Dingle, where they were doing a deconstruction tasting with master distiller Graham Cool, or Graham Cole, and they had the 3 components of batch 5 single malt. So I think it was bourbon, was it sherry and Madeira? I think.
Okay.
But yeah, so PX bourbon and Madeira, and they gave you kind of the malt of each component that made it into the batch 5, and then they tried that, and apparently it was so successful that they put together 500 of those packs to ship both domestically and internationally, which is going to be going live on the Dingle Distillery store and Irish Malt store as well. I think, which quite cool.
I mean, just from talking to John in Irish Malt's, really, really great guy. And what their plan eventually is with the subscription service is that each month it won't all be one distillery. So at the moment, I think it's easiest just with they're working through a few regulations and stuff like that. So at the moment, I think the easiest thing for them to do is to go with one distillery. And he said, he was overwhelmed by the success of the Dingle one. And they had always geared up to launch kind of in October, November. And with COVID, I think anything like that, that's a subscription service that's delivering out a drink, or, we're seeing bottled cocktails and whatever coming out now. Anything like that, I think they've absolutely struck gold during this current period, because people are sitting at home, they want to be entertained, they want something. So I think, it's just a really good system. And the guys in Irish Malts are great. And like you said, they've had some cool releases for a website that, isn't around that long, a couple of years at most. They've had some cool releases. They had the JJ Corrie Black Friday. I believe on Velvet Cap, which we'll talk about in a little while, they might have I think they have an exclusive for the first couple of weeks as well. They're running some specials on Velvet Cap as well. But, and they just have a good ethos to things, and they're kind of looking at some of the small batch or smaller releases and really, really promoting them out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have a great ability to sell that kind of sub 200 bottle releases, that kind of very exclusive. And they're the kind of places that they just kind of snap up like that, And like you were saying with the kind of online at the moment, it's definitely the kind of what's going on in the market at the moment is that online content like never before. I know last week you had a statistic for us that was like 365% increase in brand social media page interactions, which is quite cool. I know, I think Pierce Lyons Distillery have a tasting on literally right now online.
Don't switch over.
Teeling, I think, have one as well for Master Malt and Celtic Whiskey Shop. Stay here. But there's
stop giving people reasons to change, Matt.
They're terrible. Don't worry about it. Just stay here. No, they're great. But yeah, so I think, like you said, that giving them people access to that way is definitely something that is being desired by people kind of out there, which actually kind of segues really nicely into our next topic, which is the Irish Whiskey Museum's Lockin tastings. So Irish Whiskey Museum in Dublin would be quite well known as kind of a brand independent knowledge area for educating people on Irish whiskey. It's quite a cool setup overlooking Trinity College's front gate. They have a bar, which I often sit in that bar and have Irish coffees just because it's amazing views and good crack, without having to go on a tour, which is cool.
Yeah.
But at the end of their tour, you usually get to, you hear all the information throughout the tour, and then at the end, you kind of get a curated tasting of 4 different whiskeys that they choose and change each month. And they're kind of bringing that, into the home now, launching tomorrow, I think. They're doing their first Lockin tastings. So it's it's another subscription service. Each month, I think it's each month, if not weekly. Sorry, it's weekly. And basically, they'll send you out. You sign up for whichever weekly tasting you want. They'll send you 4 whiskeys. So this month is Paris Gold, Connemara Original, the Pogue 12, and Irishman Single Malt. And basically, what they'll do between 8 and 9 Irish time, they basically give you all of the information that comes with the Irish Whiskey Museum, but also a full curated tasting of those whiskeys that have been dropped straight to your door. So I think there's so much on offer at the moment in terms of whiskey knowledge, information, and everything like that.
Whiskey entertainment, essentially. Whiskey-tainment is at an all-time high, I would say. I mean, Matt, would we be here if not for quarantine and COVID? Who knows? But that's it. Like, I think everybody's just trying different ways to reach out to consumers, to give consumers as much knowledge as possible. Who knows, when we come back at the far side of this, when we're going into bars, you might see some of the most knowledgeable consumers out there coming back into bars in certain cases, because they've had time to research these things, and they've engaged with online brands and stuff, and they got little nuggets of wisdom that they can bring forward. Some cool comments there.
Yeah, we've got David over in Connacht Distillery saying great service with Irish malts. I think Irish malts just in general are doing a kind of pretty stellar job all around. And we mentioned last week, they do have an Irish shop and an international UK-based shop. So if something's sold out on one, swap over and see if you can find on the other. They'll probably kill me for saying that, but it's inside tips. Then, this is again lack of those services at dram services in South Africa. Perhaps Irish malts, they are shipping internationally. I know nothing of South African laws.
At the moment, I think they're in total lockdown. They can't buy alcohol at all until the 1st of June. So I know the guys, I'm in a few WhatsApp groups with guys back over in South Africa, and to say there's a bit of consternation would be an understatement, I'd say. So probably best not to rub it in their face, but 1st of June, they can be back buying alcohol again. I was just talking to some of the guys down in some of the bars and some of the shops down there in the last couple of days, and they're very excited to sell alcohol again. And I think the consumers down there are very excited to buy it. So should be interesting.
Is brandy and whiskey still quite big down in South Africa?
Yeah, whiskey overtook brandy a few years ago. So when I say brandy, it's a lot of the local brandy, because obviously huge wine producing region. So what are you going to do with wine? You can turn it into brandy. So whiskey overtook brandy a few years ago as the biggest spirit in the country. And South Africa has some really strange laws around whiskey. So they brought in some laws that were designed basically for protectionism measures for the brandy industry. So everything has to be 43% to enter the South African market. So second biggest market in the world for Jameson. All Jameson is bottled at 43%, for example, in South Africa. So it does taste a little bit different, and it is quite an interesting point of difference that, like Jameson Black Barrel, it's still called Jameson Select Reserve over there, for example. So yeah. And I know people who've made a lot of money selling Jameson Black Barrel in South Africa and saying, oh, well, you can't get this here. So listen,
Black market stuff, not Pernod stuff now. We're not. But John from Irish Malts dropping in, say thanks. And then Irish Malts come in to say thanks. And then not only that, 3 Drams come in and say thanks. So check out 3 Drams, guys, if you want to have a sign up. John, do let us know in the comments when your Dingle 3 Drams are going live, and then when we'll expect to see any more going live. If it's still November, or if it's advanced a little bit.
Cool.
I think it's probably a good moment to pause and thank Connacht Whiskey Company again for sponsoring tonight's show. I am actually genuinely very much enjoying this.
It's really good. About halfway through the bottle now at this point. So
well, this is the small point at which I have small bottle far away. This point at which I've been quite excited about. The guys in Connacht will know that and a lot of people online will know I'm quite a big fan of this Ballyhoo Irish single grain Irish whiskey. Just tear off the top now to show it's a new bottle. As I said, there was an original release, which is this guy up here. So it's a 4-year-old single grain whiskey. That's Asian bourbon. But originally, what they were doing was they were taking about, 25% of the blend and putting it into first fill port cast. Then another 25% of the blend putting it into second fill port cast. Then the remainder of the 50 into bourbon, and it actually ended up with some really cool and interesting flavors. One of the ones that I used to get a lot was kind of a kiwi fruit, which I felt like kind of a ripe kiwi, which I just thought was very cool and unusual, and I really like for Irish whiskey. But now what they've done is they wanted to kind of bring up the port influence on it. So they have scrapped their kind of staggered scheme and they've now put all of the single grain into first fill port casks for a minimum of 12 weeks. Sorry, getting confused between the Spade and Bushel was 13 months and the port cask.
Yeah, I saw you getting confused on Twitter earlier as well, Matt. It's okay. It's all right. Okay.
I did. I had to apologize for that one. I did get them a little bit thrown asunder on which one was which there. But yeah, finish for about a minimum of 12 weeks, first fill port.
David is very confused at your kiwi fruit note, like, and for anyone that doesn't know, David is the man over in Connacht Distillery. So
yeah,
Matt, are you sure?
I don't know, but that was my estimation of it, and it's something I quite liked. Those I put up those messages from David in the reverse order. He said that it was very informative, and then questioned the kiwi fruit. And David, you're right. There's far too many numbers. That is why I'm getting confused over my weeks, my months. So 4-year-old single grain, 12-week port cask finish.
There you go. That's all you need to say, Matt.
Exactly. It's also on the ticker. If I'm getting confused. And Alan and myself often find ourselves agreeing with each other online that this is absolutely fantastic single grain. And then Carl coming in and saying that he picked it up on a whim and now is a staple in his whiskey cabinet. Also, a fantastic price. It's quite affordable for the kind of quality you're getting, both in Ireland and abroad, which makes it. I see it pop up online quite a lot. So I'm gonna have a little sip there. I don't know if you have any in your glass with you at the moment.
I'm very far away from my bottle. To be honest, I'm happy. I'm gonna polish this off properly.
And there's a nice little kind of reddish hue to that one as well. Actually, quite like a lighter version of Amarone. David hasn't had a kiwi in about 15 years, so maybe that's the issue. Maybe you're the problem. Maybe I'm not the problem. Probably me. Though.
No, you're usually the problem.
Yeah, I'm usually the problem.
Anyone that knows you knows you're the problem.
Thanks for that. See, this is just you. This is you just training me up with a thicker skin Louise wants me to have. But yeah. So
what have we got?
Sorry?
What's up next, Matt?
Well, loads of things. I mean, I'm settling in with this. You're settling in with the Amarone.
Yeah.
The next thing, I suppose, for us that we set aside to talk about is the Grace O'Malley rum cask. Now, there's a few releases from the guys at Grace O'Malley. I have a bottle down here. Whoa, nearly knocked over a load of Teelings. This is kind of their blended whiskey, kind of a reflective label there. But their newest release is their rum cask. This is quite cool. I have always liked these. They're very cool. It's actually like a hand stitched leather label, which I'm not even like. I don't even want to know what effort goes into bottling something with a hand stitched leather label. But yeah, 42% alcohol, rum cask blend. This is another one I was talking earlier about the Pierce Lyons that they use 2 different distilleries, malt and then grain. Grace O'Malley do the exact same thing. So they are 40% double distilled malt, 6% triple distilled malt, and then the remainder is grain. And then
finished in
rum casks, Jamaican and Barbados rum casks. Excuse me. Which, funnily enough, I've been talking to a number of people over the last little while that about kind of rum cask history in Irish whiskey, and a lot of people think it's quite new and innovative. Excuse me. But even one in the 1950s and the late 1940s, there's kind of readily available accounts of B. Daly's of Tullamore, the original Tullamore distillery, buying quite a number of rum casks. And Fionnán O'Connor was enlightening me the other day that in kind of the mid to late 1800s, rum casks would have been quite plentiful coming over from the likes of Guyana and French Guyana.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about Ireland in the late 1800s, Cork, Haulbowline Island. I used to live on Haulbowline Island when I was in the Navy, and that was the victualling yard. It was the butcher's yard for the entire Royal Navy. So you had a huge amount of ships coming in and out of that. Cork is the world's second deepest natural harbour in the world behind Sydney Harbour. So you've all these naval ships swinging in and out of Cork, swinging in and out of Ireland. So obviously they're going to have some casks coming back. I mean, the only thing that was really non-existent in Irish whiskey was before World War II was bourbon casks. Bourbon casks really weren't a thing in Irish whiskey. When you look back in the annals of Irish whiskey, the bourbon casks just weren't there. It was caught myself. It was fortified wine, it was sherry, and probably some rum as well. It was essentially whatever you had to hand was what people were putting in. But yeah, the Irish whiskey of old would definitely have been heavy in the fortified wine influence. And what I found interesting about the Grace O'Malley rum cask was, like you said, similar to what we were talking about last week with the Slieve League, there's a bit of double distilled malt, there's a bit of triple distilled malt. So it is quite interesting that now we are starting to see these differences in Irish whiskey. That because there are so many distilleries, because there's stock flying around from place to place, that we are starting to see these differences coming into the market, which is absolutely brilliant. It's great to see these subtle differences, and then they'll become not so subtle as we get further along down the line. Like we're seeing, for the first time, we're seeing blended grains. For the first time, we're seeing blended malts, and yeah, it's just great. So Jamaica and Barbados, two British style rum producing nations. So you're going to get quite a heavy, robust kind of a rum. And so yeah, I'm sure when you taste it, you can tell us, but I'm sure that comes across in the final product. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's interesting you're talking about the different casks that would have been in Irish whiskey. I think some of the interesting ones I was looking at in recent days in old records, chestnut barrels seasoned with vermouth, which was definitely something that I didn't read about in the marketing manual.
Where did you come across that one?
In old cask from the kind of 30s and 40s, selling into Ireland. If you want to know, compared to everything else, they were very cheap.
Yeah, so to be fair, that sounds somewhat awful. I'm not gonna lie.
Although something I thought was really cool, and I definitely want to make somebody make this for me. They were selling port pipes with rum cask heads. Was like a staple for one of the dealers in the 50s.
Yeah, I mean, look, plenty of flavor. The little bit of rum introduced that bit of tropical fruit into the whiskey. Why not? So what's the price point on that one, Matt? 65?
$64.99 for the Grace O'Malley. Yeah. Cool. So I think that's going to be a good winner, and also quite giftable as well. Like there's that label in itself just jumps off any shelf.
Yeah, it's nice branding, nice bottling.
We have a couple of things in here. South Africa is tuning out. Apparently, they'll get fined for being on the internet after 10 o'clock.
Don't believe anything that man tells you.
Okay. So just back to David Stapleton on the Ballyhoo. Is it better? I would say that this is definitely a step up from before. I don't quite get the Kiwi notes that I was getting before, so but I'm getting a huge host of all different kind of dark fruits and a little bit of and actually what a nice kind of single grain backbone on it as well, which is quite nice and balanced. Irish Malts dropping in saying the Dingle special edition of the 3 drams, which is what they're bringing us back to here, will be released in the next few days. They'll do another special edition in September featuring 3 different whiskeys, 3 new whiskeys, and in November, 3drams.com launches and becomes a monthly subscription. So kind of two little soft launches for the guys there. And Dara says the first edition of Grace O'Malley was a leather label in black. I do remember that. I think it might have green or kind of a silver text on it as well. But that came out before the blend, which I showed up earlier. Then let me have a look. Saying there'll be guys in Connacht will be bringing Kiwis into the office tomorrow. So I'm confused. David Stapleton and also David Connacht are commenting.
He's just helping bulk up the numbers. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Right. Well, we'll move swiftly onward. So something quite exciting. I think Velvet Cap from Blackwater Distillery. Michael, I know you've been looking into this one for a good bit. If you want to kick us off.
No, I think we mentioned it last week. We mentioned Down last week as fast becoming the distilling capital of Ireland. And I think when you look at Waterford, it is probably the innovation, perhaps the innovation whiskey capital of Ireland when it comes to things. So Waterford Distillery, owned by Mark Rainier, is obviously single estate, and we might get onto that in a little while. But the guys in Blackwater and Peter Mulryan are just releasing their Velvet Cap whiskey. So again, it is a sourced whiskey. It is the second sourced whiskey they're releasing. So previously they released a 17-year-old single malt, the Retronaut, and their idea initially, I think, was to release a series of sourced whiskies, but they kind of lost the interest in that, and they felt that the market was probably flooded with quite a few sourced whiskies. And now they've come back with Velvet Cap, and they've revived an old brand, an old Waterford brand that was previously based in Dungarvan, and so they brought it back to the market. And so it is a brand. It's reviving a brand, and I think if we look at the label and stuff as well, they say that on the label, which I think is something that's very cool. And it's due to drop in the next couple of weeks. So the breakdown on it, Matt, do you have the breakdown in front of you? It's 50-50 malt and grain, and it's ex-rye. This is quite interesting. So we've seen ex-rye casks in Irish whiskey. We would Prize Fighter, for example. We've seen stout casks. We've seen plenty of stout casks, but we haven't seen ex-rye and stout casks, as far as we know, as far as I know.
I've got nothing for you. Just this, guys. So they were taking ex-rye whiskey barrels, filling them with stout beer, essentially emptying them, filling them back up with whiskey, and then emptying and filling again. I think they were kind of doing kind of sequential.
Every 3 months, essentially. Yeah.
And then once that was all complete, they took the entire batch, I believe, and finished in port casks. Because the original Velvet Cap would have been of Thomas Power Brewery, which has no relation to the Powers of Dublin, but so there was kind of and also there would have been dealing in wine, so that kind of beer and wine influence and the fortified wine would have been kind of quite a good matching for this brand, and I think that's kind of the way they were going. Darren Green in Waterford saying reclaimed is the word they were using on the label.
So I think they're all about. To be fair to Peter and anyone who hasn't read Peter's book, Whiskies of Ireland, it's a fantastic book on Irish whiskey. And on the label, they're trying to be as transparent as possible, and they have reclaimed 2020 because there are a lot of brands out there who they are revived brands and stuff. But I think the guys in Velvet Cap, or the guys in Blackwater Distillery rather, with Velvet Cap, are trying to be just very transparent and say we've brought this back in 2020. It was established back in the 1800s, but we've brought this back in 2020, and it's going to be quite an interesting. I think the first batch is about 6,000 bottles, and reasonable price point. I think around the 40 euro mark in terms of the price point. So it's going to be something very interesting. I think Blackwater Distillery is certainly going to be one to watch, and Waterford and the Southeast in general is going to be somewhere to watch moving forward.
Exactly. Irish Malt's dropping back in saying Velvet Cap launching exclusively this Sunday on your favorite whiskey website, irishmalts.com. And I believe they're launching via a Facebook Live video on Sunday, if I'm not mistaken, on the Blackwater Facebook page with Mr. Omar Fitzell from That's Dram Good and Barry Chandler from Stories and Sips in the United States. So that'll be an interesting watch, no doubt.
Happy days.
So, we're still taking questions on anything you guys want to ask about as we're going through this evening. David Stapleton in Connacht has informed us that his right-hand woman, Ella, who is on the case, and she is on David Connacht, which is why we're having kind of a confusing two Davids from Connacht Whiskey Distillery talking to us at the same time. But something, I suppose, staying with the Waterford trend, the Waterford Distillery inaugural releases are quickly coming upon us, and they are, I suppose, being heralded as some of the most exciting.
The greatest thing to come out of Waterford since the Blah. I think the excitement around what's coming out of Waterford Distillery is crazy. So Mark Rainier, formerly of the House of Brookladdy, took over what was the old Guinness plant in Waterford and converted it to a whiskey distillery. And Mark's, we mentioned it last week. Mark is all about the terroir. It is all about that, the terroir, the one place, the everything, the grain is the most important component. And even Peter Mulryan, I heard Peter Mulryan from Blackwater, who we mentioned, talking about how we were talking about casks, and we've been talking about casks for so many years, and the grain is the new frontier when it comes to Irish whiskey. And that could be very true. I mean, we haven't had those single estate releases coming out yet, but it is something that's going to be very interesting. I mean, there are quite a few distilleries who are pushing something of a terroir kind of an idea. So I mean, Tipperary, Ballyhoo, now the guys in Waterford as well, and the guys in Waterford are going to be first to market with their whiskies. And there was a lot of excitement yesterday. There was some of them up for pre-sale, I think, on La Maison de Whiskey, and yeah, whatever quantity of them there were, they were basically sold out.
So I know that they were, I suppose, pre-COVID, I think were subject to some changes because Waterford Whiskey's release day, where it was meant to be kind of a massive launch. Sorry?
Pilgrimage, as it was called.
Exactly. That was pretty much just scuppered due to COVID, which was very unfortunate. But there were the 3 farms that were going to be released, which the Ballyhoo from Laois. And Ballyhoo Farm also have a brewery, if anyone wants to know what their beer tastes like before the whiskey. Then from Carlow, they've the Rathodon. There's an E and an A combination in there that I'm not sure how to pronounce that one correctly in English. But then they're at a Carlow, and then from the sunny southeast, there's also
the one I'm most excited about, Matt, is the one from Bannow Island in the very south of Wexford. And Bannow Island, and the southernmost tip of Wexford almost, is in 1169, where the Normans came into Ireland. And I think a lot of great things happened since then. And it's just a whiskey that I'm very excited about. It's going to be the first. Look, I think there's been a lot of malted barley, or there's been a lot of barley coming out of Wexford for a long time and going into various whiskies. It's definitely been going into whiskies from IDL and various other places, because it is such fertile soil down in Wexford. But for me, I'm quite excited because it is the first single estate whiskey calling out Wexford on the bottle. So yeah, as a yellow belly, it's something to get a little bit excited about.
Now, I have a family down in Feathered-on-Sea in Wexford, so I would have spent a lot of summers and weekends down there. And one of the kind of staples of the local area would be a little bit, maybe a 20-minute drive out of the way, but it would have been pilgrimage each weekend. Would have been Hookhead Lighthouse.
Oh yeah.
And David Stapleton in Connacht has come back to say that their single malt, all the malt comes from 11 farms in Hookhead in County Wexford. So grain definitely the Mayo Distillery going all Wexford.
Yeah, I mean, they know good stuff. They know good stuff. No, I previously I was down in one of the maltsters before, and they gave us a talk on how they were looking at different barley from different parts of the country. And they were talking about how coastal barley will give a slightly different flavor, obviously, because of all that iodine, all that sea influence coming onto it. And look, I think it only makes sense. Look, I've said this before. It only makes sense that if you put something different into a whiskey, you're going to get something out. It's as simple as that, really. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the differences are. Whiskey distillation is certainly a destructive process, but if you change the ingredients and you're gonna get something different out, and it is definitely something to be excited about. Like, there seems to be a bit of a frenzy around it, and people are going absolutely crazy for what is going to be coming out of Waterford. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they do.
Yeah, and the soil down in Wexford being that kind of sandier soil, leading to much deeper roots in most crops and vegetables and whatnot. I know Conor Ryan in Pierce Lyons talks about his years growing up in kind of the Waterford Wexford area, and he'd always be pulling out carrots in Wexford carrot fields and whatnot.
I'm never sure how I feel when I hear Dubs talking about crops. It's just I'm not 100% sure. Ye from the Pale, what would you know about it?
Well, I said Conor Ryan, he'd know better than me. Jamie Cotter up north just wants to say he hit mute during your history lesson. I feel like maybe that's what I should do with your shiting on the dubs.
Jamie, would you like to hear a history of? No, anyway, come on. Anyway, go on.
John Mark wants to know: Bannow Island not in Cork. As far as I know, that the Bannow Island, that especially the one that is in the Waterford whiskey release, is most certainly Wexford. But you, as a Wexfordian, perhaps could speak to this better than I could.
Yeah, no, definitely, most definitely in Wexford. You can't claim everything, John. Cork has some things, you can keep them, it's fine. Wexford is its own thing. Yeah.
And then Darren wants to say there was a class act that the guys in Waterford Distillery kept a lot of the old staff from the Waterford brewery that was there before the distillery. And I think their head distiller Ned was one of the head brewers there as well. And I think Neil, their head brewer as well. A lot of their core staff coming from the days. And a lot of them would have had experience, especially they have a kind of an antiquated brewery in there with as they call it, a computer from the 70s, which takes up about 3.5 lengths of a building's wall, which is about 4 solenoids. That's about it. But they're great being able to talk about that and having to actually use that at different points as well, which is quite cool. And then Irish Malts, John just coming to say lol, but the Wexford Cork.
Yeah, I think he was definitely trolling us there, man. I'll be honest, but yeah, I'm gonna rise. I'll rise to it every time.
And no doubt you should. But yeah, so I mean, I think that these are quite exciting. There's the three launches from Waterford. As I said, the first one was meant to be exclusively for the pilgrimage to the distillery on the launch.
First cuvee. So the first cuvee, I think, is a blend of different. The one for the pilgrimage is a blend of a few different. It's not a single farm in the way some of the other releases are. I think it's important to say.
Okay, yeah. And then I suppose of the three, then they have the Ballyhoo and the Bannow Island as well. That they're being launched as a 8,000 bottle release, kind of as a mixture of French and US oak, and quite interesting. They're being launched initially in kind of the European markets, and then Taiwan, China, Japan, and certain parts of Canada, and then the US and other international markets will basically receive kind of a secondary release of. From what I read, I think it's other kind of single farms.
There's all single farms. Yeah.
So that's quite an interesting differentiation and quite an interesting way to launch, I suppose, a new brand.
Certainly, and I think they're all bottled at 50%, I believe, about 70 to 79 euro in terms of price point. So nothing mental, but it's going to be 4-year-old single farm whiskey. Single farm, single malt, essentially is what you're getting. So it's going to be very interesting to kind of see the differences between all those. And there's certainly going to be a lot of tastings up and down the country where people are laying out the samples side by side and just trying to pick out those differences, I think.
Yeah, and I think it would be interesting as well, as I know they have for each farm and barley batch and distillation and everything, they kind of got a blockchain QR code built in to give you all of the information, because they do have quite detailed books and records kept on each shipment they get and the growing seasons and everything. Dave Cummins dropping in saying Wexford's doing terroir, so who's going to distill all the different varieties of barley so we compare just the barley grain? I don't know. Doesn't that compare that would require each farm to do each barley type due to the fact that it's terroir as well? There's a lot of distillation going on there.
That's an interesting point, because if you look at modern barley, okay, not to get into a conversation about grain, but if you look at modern barley, the likes of the Propino and the Concerto that we're using now, you're probably getting about 4 tons per acre. Whereas back in the day when they were using stuff like bear barley, which was stuff that almost fell over when it was growing, you're probably getting a ton per acre. So I mean, it's developed over the century, over the last 100 years or so, to where it's all about yield. But there's certainly going to be a difference between different varietals in terms of, different starch content, different protein content, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, Dave, I think it's an interesting point, but I don't know who's actually going to do it. Maybe the guys in Waterford will at some point, or maybe one of the other new smaller crafty distilleries will decide to take that one on.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting because the guys in Waterford are distilling different types of barley. I know they have Olympus and another some other kind of more historic styles of barley in there as well. And I think perhaps Dave's question is quite nuanced as well. That perhaps it requires kind of more of a discussion in itself because you'd have to do a lot of kind of different bits on that, if that makes sense. But it's definitely something that's very exciting. And as you said, the kind of the bare barleys and whatnot, Clonakilty Distillery are also both dairy farmers and barley farmers by trade, and they've been working with their local seed banks to bring back kind of extinct varietals of malting barley from years ago. And I remember talking to them about it, and obviously they haven't been grown in whatever 100, 150 years. It's just kind of seeds locked away somewhere. And
for when the world ends.
Sorry?
For when the world ends, Matt. That's what the seed banks are for.
Exactly. And the guys in Clonakilty were kind of laughing to themselves because they're on their farms overlook the Gallyhead Lighthouse out in Cork, and it's literally like on the edge of a cliff. And one of the strains they had, or one of the kind of antiquated varietals they had, hadn't built the resistance to wind, essentially. So the stalks grew very brittle. So then basically they grew to half height, and the wind came and knocked them all down. And then they grew another type of barley that was an antiquated, historic malting varietal at some point, but it was a carpet barley, so it didn't grow vertically at all. It grew that way. And they had to call a buddy of theirs that's really into like farmabilia, and they had to get this like cutting equipment from the 1800s and refurbish it.
They got a dude with a scythe, essentially, did they? And he went out there, Grim Reaper style, pulled up that barley.
No, they had like machines to like pull up the barley and like cut beneath it and whatnot and chop it up. And they said it was a whole ordeal just to get it. I suppose collected, but it was quite interesting. But yeah, I mean, the world's abuzz with Waterford Distillery right now. It'll be interesting to see what their releases taste like. So it's just to kind of round this off.
We know we went for 2 hours last week, and we do like to talk. So I'm trying to rein Matt in here tonight, and it's not the easiest thing because he loves talking about that barley. When he gets onto that barley chat, he's just gone. Would anyone like to hear a story about how grain is made? And potentially this is the only forum in the world where people might like to hear a story about grain.
Listen,
but we're not sure.
You want to hear about pearl barley? We'll steam some pearl barley and make some whiskey out of it. There we go. Now, Ala's over in Connacht Distillery saying the conditions in the West might be poor for growing barley, but Connacht Whiskey release will be epic. And that is probably a good point to kind of round us out for the evening. That the guys at Connacht, they have, I think, one or two more releases in kind of the Spade and Bushel family. I know I think they might have a 14-year-old finishing away in the warehouses. And then after that point, they have their own whiskey to be released, I think, in Q4 this year. So it'll be a malt whiskey, and that is also kind of finishing away in the warehouses at the moment. I think the plans are a little pushed back now by COVID, obviously. I think everybody is feeling plans kind of scuppered by COVID, but it'll be quite cool to see, instead of just sourced whiskey that's been finished in Connacht, wholly distilled and matured in Connacht whiskey, which will be very cool.
I think we're all looking forward to that day where we can try and pick out those differences from distillery to distillery. Where at the moment, if you taste a Bushmills versus a Middleton versus a Cooley, you can genuinely pick out the differences. You can see the distillery style, and you can taste it based on what the stills are like. And you if you're into tasting your whiskey, you would know the difference. But I think when we have the 31 distilleries that we now have up and running with aged stock, I think it's going to be a really interesting time. So it's a lot to look forward to. And Irish malts coming in again. That limited 5-year-old that we're currently drinking, going to be with them in the very near future. So yeah, glass is now empty. So yeah, I actually really like it. It's really good.
So I think pretty much what we've learned this evening, whether it's the newest release from Connacht, the 5-year-old Spade and Bushel Amarone cask, or it's the Velvet Hat from from Blackwater, you're getting a great pick of the litter at Irish Malts. 3 drams, of course, as well. So I think this started as a.
Who sponsors this?
Well, the Connacht, interestingly, but apparently Irish Malts are all the talk. But no, a very big thank you to Connacht Whiskey Company. As I said, we had the 5-year-old, which was definitely the kind of star of the show for the beginning. And I know Michael imbibed himself for the period of the show on that, and I had myself on the Ballyhoo single grain. So a very big thank you to them for looking after us and for getting us some of those new samples. And for everyone listening in, very much appreciate you tuning in on your evening to yourselves. For the comments, the slagging, the information, all much appreciated. So
I would just like to reiterate before Matt ends that yes, I believe we probably are the worst thing to happen to Irish whiskey since the column still, and I will double down on that. Thank you.
And send in your abusive tweets for next week.
Anything you send in, it's like Ron Burgundy. Anything you send in, I will read it. So I mean, just send them in. It's all good.
Perfect. Well, Michael, to you, to everyone else, and most importantly to Connacht Whiskey Company. Talk to you later.
Cheers.